program, let me take you back yet another century in time to Beethoven. In his lifetime, he published 5 piano concertos, and the one I'm playing today is the first published concerto. However, it was actually written after the second published concerto. Nevertheless, these are both works of Beethoven, examples of Beethoven in his youth, just coming out of the Mozartian tradition. Yet, it is his innovative spirit is already evident throughout just this movement alone. For instance, in the classical tradition, in the first movement of a piano concerto, the orchestra usually plays an introduction presenting all of the thematic materials in the movement, which it does. And so on. And to conclude, and the introduction usually concludes with the grand cadence. Soloist to enter. And typically, in the classical tradition, the soloist would be expected to enter with what the orchestra first presented, which would be. However, Beethoven, after his great grand cadence, the soloist enters. Spiraling into the opening theme that was presented. The movement could be split into 3 sections, and the middle section is what we typically call the development section. And this is where the composer shows off his creativity by developing the theme that were presented in the beginning. And in this movement, Beethoven takes us to the distant world of E-flat major. And you hear this long sustaining pedal, which is not often heard in classical music of that era. And this is a great indicator of the direction he headed toward later in his life. One final interesting feature I would like to point out about this movement is the cadenza. The cadenza usually appears at the end of the movement, and it is where the orchestra stops, and it's the soloist's moment to shine and dazzle the audience. And it was typically improvised. Up until late Mozart and Beethoven, composers started writing their own cadenzas. And for this particular movement, Beethoven gave us 3 options. And the one most commonly played, and the one which I'm playing today, was actually written many, many years after the first publication of the first concerto. So we have a chunk of mature Beethoven in the middle of his youth, and it is highly dramatic and harmonically daring, and it's, yeah. And just to give you a scope of the entire feel of the entire concerto, I'm just going to speak a little bit about the next 2 movements. The second movement, so the first movement ends. And the second movement comes in this magical key of A-flat major. And it's just one of the most beautiful slow movements. And the third movement is playful, and it just kind of rollicks along and ends the concerto on a high note. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming the lovely Miss Stephanie Jacob, playing the orchestral reduction.